in this series, where we're going to discuss as part of the Smicha program, looking at different Shalot Shavot, not only of Sephardic rabbis, of all Hachamim. This is the literature known as Shut or Responsa. And first, I would like to speak about the importance of studying Shalot Shavot as opposed to looking at books of Halacha. The difference between the two genres is that when you look at halachic literature that was codified, such as Maimonides, the Tur, Shulchan Aruch, Mishnah Berurah, Yalkut Yosef, etc., all of these provide us with the final conclusion. Sometimes in the later books, such as Yalkut Yosef and Mishnah Berurah and Aruch HaShulchan also, you might find more detailed discussions and references to previous books, but in all of them, the halacha as it is presented to us is distilled and final, and we don't know the details, the personal details of the case. So the halacha becomes a bit impersonal, and also you get the sense that it applies to everyone. Meanwhile, when you read the Shut, the Responsa, you get the sense of the location, the context in time and place of that halachic discussion. What was society like? What were the issues that troubled people? Some unique elements that are that apply only to this time and place, and also we get to see the mentality of the posek, the approach when he comes to analyze the question. What are the factors that he takes into account? Who are the other rabbis that he relies on? How much does he use precedents? What kind of language does he use, etc. So we'll see as we go through the Teshuvot that there are different within the Shalot Teshuvot. There are different genres. There are different styles of answering the questions, and we also see that there is one of the main fault lines where we could draw a distinction. Is between real questions and fictitious questions, because that was common for rabbis to present their hidushim, their new ideas or understandings of the Gemara, as in the form of a question, or create hypothetical cases and answer them. Those questions have their own value, but they're not as powerful as a question that relates to real actions. This is the distinction that the Gemara draws between halacha le ma'aseh. When a Talmid Chacham would come and say that he heard something from his rabbi, they would say halacha shamata or ma'aseh. Was it a law that was just taught as a halacha, or ma'aseh, or did you see a practical action, a practical application of the halacha? And also when it's lema'aseh, we know that it's not just a theoretical statement, but something that the rabbi would rely on and use in real life. And in that context, also one should know whether that ma'aseh, that action, was limited to specific circumstances, and whether it was understood right. So all these elements are important to have in mind when we study Shalot Teshuvot, and this is something that we could usually learn as we go through the text. So I'm going to start today with once again with the Shalot Teshuvot of Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi, who is known also as the Rif. Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi lived with one second. Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi lived in the 11th century from 1013 to 1103. They call him Alfasi, meaning from the city of Fez, even though he spent most of his life in Algeria. But the majority of his career was in Fez. He was born in the city of Qal'at Bani Hamad. That city, Qal'at Bani Hamad, was the capital of the Muslim conquerors in Algeria. They built their capital in the middle of the desert because they were used to desert fighting. It was easier for them to defend a capital that was built in the desert and not one that was built as it was traditional North Africa by the shores of the sea. He spent a lot of his time in Fez, and then he studies also in Kairouan, in Tunisia, and spent some of his time in Spain. Rabbi Yosef ibn Migash, or Ibn Megas, some call him that, who was the teacher of Rabbeinu Maimon, the father and teacher of Maimonides, was his student. And Rabbi Yosef ibn Migash, or let's call him Ibn Megas, Rabbi Yosef ibn Megas is an important posek that hopefully we'll get to also, of whom Maimonides says that that the understanding and analysis of that man of Rabbi Yosef is awe-inspiring, and it's not something simple for Maimonides to say. So this is this is the Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi. His main book is now Sefer HaHalachot, which was also called Talmud Rav Alfas. And with Talmud Rav Alfas, what Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi did, he extracted all the halachot from the Talmud. Extracted all the halachot from the Talmud. He did away with all the non-essential discussion in the Talmud, with all the narrative, the agadot, the digressions, the repetitive questions, and minimize the Talmud to only only the relevant halachot, that meaning that the halachot that were not practical of korbanot, of the Bet HaMikdash, etc., were not part of it, and also within those texts that were important and are applicable for today, he cleaned them from the unnecessary, we could call it chatter, that happens around them. And that is extremely important because in today's mentality, in the yeshiva world, and even in some non-Orthodox circles, the Talmud is considered to be the most important book in Jewish literature, for some even before the Bible. And here we have a Hacham, a Sephardic scholar. Of course, Sephardic, though he lived in mostly in North Africa. But here we have this Hacham who wants to eliminate the study of Talmud as it is and goes more for an abbreviated or abridged version of the Talmud. And it's more than just an abridged version by the way that Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi dissects the text and takes out some parts. That in itself is a process of pesika. Only that he shows us his opinion by not being there. He's usually quiet. He doesn't say this is what I think. Not in the Talmud Rav Alfas. Unlike Maimonides, which is more center stage, and he would say this is my opinion, and in his introduction he explains that this is how he works. Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi does it quietly. But have in mind also that Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, who is an indirect disciple of Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi, also wanted to do away with the Talmud, because he said that you study once you have Mishneh Torah, all you have to study is the Torah and my book, and you don't need any other book in between. So the Talmud for Maimonides is outdated. In reality, for several hundred years in the Sephardic yeshivot, the main focus of learning was Talmud Rav Alfas or Ilchot Rav Alfas. They study the abridged version, the halachic version of Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi. But then it was the study of Talmud was reintroduced or revived in the Sephardic yeshivot by people like Rabbi Moshe ben Nachmanides and his Talmidim, Rashba, Ritva, who were in contact with the Ashkenazi schools of thought, with the Baalei Tosafot, and brought it back to Sepharad. So we're going to review today a couple of the shuvot in the what is called the Shut Rif, the Responsa of the Rif, and okay. I went ahead a little bit. No, I want to go back. what is very interesting and typical to the shoot of the Rif, that the question and answer are very brief. If you're familiar with the later Shelot Uchuvot, even Maimonides already is longer than the discussions are longer than the discussions of the Rif, and the Rif is very, very concise. It just goes right to the point. And also another thing that we'll note is the almost complete absence of references. Unlike later Shutim that will refer and will send you to the Talmud in this page, the Talmud on that page, and that must not page actually, because they didn't have pages yet. At his time, they would send you they would refer the reader to a tractate and a chapter. And Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi doesn't do that. And we will see why this is the case. So here's the first Shuvah that I want to review. This is Shut Arif Siman Hey. And here was this. Reuven haya lo eved, untano b'matana l'Shimon, v'hikna oto lo. So Reuven had a slave, and he gave the slave as a gift to Shimon. That already, the question already teaches us that Jews at that time owned slaves, and that they traded them. They either sold them or gave them as gifts. There we have documents from the Geniza of the deeds of sale of slaves. Usually those slaves, after several generations of owners, would be freed, and in many cases would become part of the Jewish family. Through Giyu, through conversion, only that the path to conversion was much easier once those people served as slaves for a while, and it seems preposterous to us now, but the way people purchased slaves at the time, it was not similar to the slave trade in America in modern times, in recent history, that slave traders would raid places deliberately for the acquisition and commercial selling of slaves, but rather usually they were captives of war or captives of pirates who are all over the Mediterranean and on the shores of North Africa would capture people and then resell them, and especially in Jewish communities, people would redeem Jewish captives, and they would buy slaves to serve them. But as I said, it was the capturing of people was not for the purpose of slavery. Usually they were captives of war, and that happened in all Jewish territories amongst the Faradim and Ashkenazim. In Ashkenazi communities, the slaves usually came from Slavic countries. In any case, we go back to the Sheila. The question is, Reuven had a slave whom he gave as a gift to Shimon, ve'ikna oto lo, and he made Shimon, the buyer, the sole owner of the slave. לאחר זמן, ביקש לחזור בו, והוציא שטר מודעה באותה מתנה. After a while, he wanted to change his mind. He regretted the gift, and he presented a moda'ah. Moda'ah is a denouncement of the deed. So there were cases where people were forced to sell or to give something as a gift, and they would write at the same time of the original document. They would take two witnesses and write in front of them a document that says that the gift they gave or the sale that they have just made is invalid, that they were forced and was done unwillingly. For that reason, that concept of moda'ah, of a annulment of a deed, we include in Ketubot already from antiquity, a text that says that I now annul all annulments, meaning that in case the husband would try to argue later on that he did not intend to marry that woman and that he was forced into that, we include in the ketubah a line that says, if a document will produce later on, which will show that I have annulled the ketubah, or I have annulled the deed of marriage, from now, I'm announcing that all such documents are invalid. So we're invalidating the invalidation, just to make sure that the ketubah is valid. In this case, there was no such announcement made, and Shimon produces shtar moda'a be'ota matana. So he produces an annulment of the gift. והוציא שמעון שטר המתנה, וכתוב ב ששמעון זה היה בידו שטר מתנת ראובן שנתן לו עבד. So Shimon was able to present the deed of the gift, in which it says that Shimon owned the original document, אלא שהיה שטר בנייר שאינו חזק. So the document was written on thin paper that is not durable. That is another interesting thing to consider. The paper was very expensive. Parchment was expensive. If we look at the discussions in the Talmud, they speak about the value of a document. They say the document has no a piece of paper is a piece of paper. It's worth nothing. The only worth that it has is a legal worth of the words on it. But it's just it's not an innate value of the paper. And then the Gemara answers that the only physical value of a paper is latzur al pitz lohito. You could use it as a cover for a bowl or a bottle. So today we use saran wrap. Back then, if they had remnants of paper or parchments, they would use it to cover bottles and jugs, and that would be the physical use for used paper. In that case, the document was written on thin paper, בנייר שאינו חזק, שלושה עדים וכתבו בנייר. Here a word is missing. It has to be והביא. So they brought 3 witnesses, וכתבו בנייר חזק אות באות, והעמידו אותם עדים על אותו שטר המחודש. So they took parchment, stronger paper, and they copied the original document letter by letter, and the very same witnesses testified and signed on the new document. ונתקיימה אצלם עדות העדים שהיו באותו שטר הראשון. And in this way, they have sustained the testimony of the witnesses on the first document. ונמצא זמן זה השטר קודם זמן המודעה. And so now we have an interesting situation. We have an original document that was not durable, and the owner of the document brought witnesses. They copied the original and they signed the copy. So that would be parallel to a process of notarizing a copy today, which the notarized copy is valid as the original one. The problem was that the moda'ah, the annulment of the gift, was written between the writing of the original document and the writing of the copy. ונמצא זמן זה השטר זה קודם זמן המודעה, וטען ראובן ואמר שכיוון שהעתיקו העדים את השטר, הוחלף זמן זה והוקדם זמן המודעה שלו. So Reuven, the giver of the gift, argues that since the witnesses wrote a new document, the annulment predates the document of the gift. ושמעון אומר לא העידו על השטר עד שהגיעו אותו עם השטר הראשון ולא נמצא ביניהם הפרש אות אחת. Shimon says this is an exact copy of the original document. There's not even one letter difference between them. So it has the same validity and the same authority of the first document, and it is binding from the moment that the original one was written, and therefore the annulment of the gift which was written later to that is not binding. So this is the question, and you see here an interesting thing, that the answer is half the length of the question, which is not the case with modern Shalot Utshuvot, especially with the Shalot of Haim Ovadia Yosef. You could have a question of one paragraph, and the answer would go on pages to end, and in some cases of medieval Sephardic Shalot Utshuvot, especially from the Balkan, like Binyamin Ze'ev and Shut Radach Rabbi David HaKohen, or the Shut of Rabbi Israel Moshe Hazan, there's a whole book hundreds of pages with maybe 10 or 15 shalot utshuvot. So each one of them takes 20, 30 pages. Here, the Rif answers with two and a half lines. It says this: Im zman hamoda'a har zman hamatana, en hamoda'a mo'elet klum. If the annulment took place after the original gift, the annulment is not valid. V'zeh sheto'an she'uhlaf hazman einam. And his argument that the time has changed is not valid. ובלבד שיהיו אלו שלוש העדים שהחליפו השטר בקיאים בשטרות ובעניינים כדי שלא יוכל אדם לרמות להם. He says the only thing that you need to know is that those three witnesses who were in charge of the new document are knowledgeable in the laws of documents and the related matters, so they cannot be deceived by people. So here we learn another thing, that those three adim are in essence a bedin. He doesn't call them bedin, but they have similar authority. And as long as they know and they understand how documents work, they can be businessmen, they understand those matters, and they cannot be easily deceived. We trust that the copying of the document then was done correctly. But he adds, "Im enam bekiim b'shtarot uvimkom hamachak v'hagered." If they don't understand well the problems with shtarot and mekom hamachak v'hagered, this is something that was unique to the documents at the time. Today, less common, but it happens when corrections need to be made, and that is that because of the price of parchment, and also because of the meticulous work of the scribe of writing the documents, if a mistake was made, you would not throw it out and make a new document, but rather you would scratch the place, and this place is usually called mahak in the language of the Gemara. That's erasure. It's even mentioned in Chot Shabbat in chapter 7, in the Mishnah Shabbat, chapter 7, Mishnah 2. It speaks about hakotev v'hamohek al menat lichtov shtei otiyot. So when the Mishnah speaks about he who erases in order to write two letters, it means that he's in the process of writing a document, and he needs to erase the old text in order to write new text. And documents sometimes were used, the same parchment were sometimes used more than once, more than twice even, that once the document has expired, let's say it's a loan and the loan was paid, the whole text would be erased and a new document would be written on top of it. And archaeologists and people who study manuscripts today were sometimes able to recover the original text from under a written document. So if those people don't understand how documents work, and they don't understand all the laws that apply to mekom mahak v'ageret, to the place where you scratch, erase, or legaret is to scratch, that when you make a correction you have to sign there as well, if we know that they are not knowledgeable, yishava ba'al matana שבועת הסת, שלא יחליף בשטר אות אחת ולא רימה ויחזיק בעבד. So now, in case they are not so knowledgeable, we would have thought that the Rif would say, okay, give the slave back to the original owner. He says, no, we will make the owner of the gift, the one who is now in possession of the slave, we make him swear, שבועת הסת, and שבועת הסת means that he's incited to say the שבועה, that technically he should not have said it, but because the giver of the gift questions his right to own the slave, he has to take that oath. He has to swear that nothing was changed from the original document. I mean, they don't have the original document, otherwise they could have compared it to each other, and they would have the date. Velorima, and he has to swear that he did not make any step which is deceptive, and then he could maintain control of the slave. But what we see, like I mentioned before, very important element in the teshuvah of the Rif, no mention whatsoever of any sugya in the Gemara. It doesn't. I mean, there are lengthy discussion of moda'ot and matanot in Masechet Bava Batra, and in Gittin, in Ktubot. It's all over the place. But the Rif rules like the Geonim. The Rif is still within the tradition of the Geonim. He doesn't need to adhere to the... Not that he doesn't adhere to the Talmud, but he doesn't have to quote it. He doesn't have to cite it. And in other places he does somewhat, but in general this is the approach. So imagine if we have a posek today that is asked a question, looks up the Talmudic sugyot that are related to it, and answer in a brief passage like that, how much... he will find himself in the crossfire, because people say, what do you base it on? And this is what my Rambam also did, but he distilled all of his halachot into the Mishneh Torah. Okay, so let's look at you in another interesting question. שאלה ו' ראובן נתן משדותיו להקדש ונפטר, ועמדה הקהילה ומכרה אותה שדה והוציאה דמיה בכך וכך ובסוחי ציבור. Reuven gave some of his gifts to the Ekdesh. He, meaning that he declared that some of his property would belong to the community. Hekdesh is what is called in Arabic waqf. That is, those are possessions that are used by the community. They could decide to use them as they are or sell them. ועמדה הקהילה ומכרה אותה שדה, and the community sold that field and spend the money בכך וכך בצורכי ציבור, and spend it on the needs of the community. Also interesting, I think we see that something that we maybe associate only with today's communities, living well, the inherent legacy and all that, people giving their possessions to the community. That has been done before. This is 1,000 years old teshuvah. And the Kehillah, there's a board, it's called Tovei Ha'ir, usually 7 people. They're in charge, and they decided to sell the field and use the money to maintain the community or to help, who knows if it was a soup kitchen or something like that. והחזיק בה הלוקח שנים הרבה, ועמד עכשיו אחד מהן ותבע אותו. ואמר שאין הקהל רשאי להוציא דמי שדה זו אלא בהקדש. So now, after the buyer already had the field for many years, one of the members of the community sued him, and he said that the community is not allowed to spend the money that they got from the selling of the field, except for buying other real estate, and there had to be real estate property that the community will hold, or for things with higher sanctity, as it is mentioned in Masechet Megillah, chapter 3. בני העיר שמכרו רחובה של עיר לא ייקחו בדמיו תיבה, etc. That when the community sells an object or real estate that has certain sanctity, it could use the money to buy things with of a higher sanctity. So he answers this: מי שהקדיש כלום לבית הכנסת, if anyone dedicated something to the synagogue, אין אדם בעולם רשאי להמיר אותו דבר ולא למוכרנו כל זמן ששם בעליו עליו. As long as people still know that that object belonged to the owner, meaning they refer to the field as the field of Reuven. Maybe 100 years from now, nobody will remember that the field belonged to Reuven, unless there's some kind of a monument there. But if not, once this is called nishtaka Hashem, the moment the name was forgotten, becomes one of the possessions of the community. It's just like currency. But as long as the name is still there, אין אדם בעולם רשאי להמיר אותו דבר ולא למוכרנו, it cannot be exchanged or sold. אלא אם יימכר לדבר מצווה, כגון פדיון שבויים וכדומה להם, מן המצווה, כגון כתיבת ספר תורה עם מוצרך אליו. So they can only be sold for a mitzvah, כגון פדיון שבויים, such as paying the ransom for captives. We just spoke about that. I said it was a very common reality in the time of the Rif. Or another mitzvah, כגון כתיבת ספר תורה, or writing a Sefer Torah, im mutzrach elav. Those three words are important. Why does it say im mutzrach elav? It is to say that they cannot decide, we have a field, and right now it's sort of extra cash or extra money. Let us buy another Sefer Torah. We already have, they don't need more than two, because the most that you would read at once are two Sefarim, and if you need three, you could roll one of them back. So they cannot claim that they need another Sefer Torah unless they need it. If they really don't have it, they could buy Sefer Torah with the money that they got from selling the field. ואלו שמכרו ההקדש והוציאו בצורכיהם שלא כדין עשו ושלא כדין נהגו. And those people who sold the field and used it for the needs of the community that are not directly used for mitzvah purposes, as he mentioned here, they did not do the right thing. So what do you do now? ויש עליהן לפדותו מן הלוקח ולהחזירו לחזקת ההקדש. They must buy it back from the buyer and put it back under the waqf, under the ekdesh of the community. But they have to negotiate the price. When we say they have to rebuy it, they don't. It's not a nullification of the deal. They don't say, here, take back the money that you gave us and give us the field, but rather they have to buy it. So if he now asks for a double or triple price, he's entitled to do that. And that person who presented the lawsuit should be aided by the community, because this is the law. It's not just the community who's involved, but as if it were, God Himself is one of the parties, and the person who passed away is also a plaintiff here. And I think that's an important halacha. There are many discussions in early responsa, in medieval literature, about situations like that, where people dedicated their possessions to the Bet Knesset and how they were used. There were cases where people were blocked from using it by the giver of the gift. That was a source of power and control for the community, for individuals, but also for people. It was a sense of they did something good with their money. And on the other side, there was always the fear of corruption and embezzlement. And that fear goes all the way back to biblical times. It is mentioned that when Yoshiyahu and Yehoiada renovated the temple, they trusted the craftsmen to spend the money correctly on the renovations of the temple. The Talmud says in the Midrash that the people suspected Moshe that he took from the money of the Mishkan for his own needs. And the halacha in the Talmud says that when people collect, when the gabaim, when those who are in charge of the charity funds collect money in the public place, in the marketplace, they have to do it. They cannot do it individually. They have to go in groups of 2 or 3, so people will know that there's control. There is there's no oversight, and someone is making sure that the money would go to charity. So there was always a very touchy subject, and we see that Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi takes it seriously. He says this: "Im halokeach hikir b'shat halekiha shaya laekdesh, en lo ela damim shenatan bilvad." If the buyer knew at the time of the purchase that the field belonged to Ekdesh, so he was not supposed to buy it. Maybe he should have asked a judge, a hacham, whether he's allowed to buy it or not. And if he did not do that, en lo ela damim shenatan bilvad. So he only gets the same amount that he paid for the field. Not only that, יעשו עמו חשבון מכל מה שאכל מן הפירות. לאחר שיוציא מה שהוציא בעבודת השדה. And then they also have to calculate how much he benefited from the field after they deduct his expenses. So Obviously, that's not an easy process. They have to calculate how much money he invested in taking care of the field, and also how much time, if that's the only field that he had, that basically his livelihood is an income. So they had to balance that as well. But we see that the Rif is very strict here in protecting the will of the deceased in the way he gave the money to the synagogue, and is concerned about the those who were handling the money not doing things correctly. So he doesn't really give them any wiggle room here, and that's an important thing, because unfortunately until today it would still happen in synagogues and religious organizations that those who are on top have the ability, and sometimes do that, to embezzle funds from the community. So he considered that to be an embezzlement, and so tzibur, it was not the right thing, and he is against it. And again, here, what is lacking completely from the teshuvah is any reference to any Talmudic sugya. The next teshuvah that I want to discuss is teshuvah kafhet in the Rif. I'm just answering your question. The fact that you have only that brief question and answer, the rabbi knows the correspondence back then was very personal. People knew, if you read the, for example, Moshe Gil's work on the life of Jews, which was B'malchut Ishmael b'tkufat ha'geonim, there are 4 volumes of discussions and letters. The process was, you would send letters with merchants, with caravans. You would hand it over to the one in charge. You would know who was the author, who sent it. I mean, they didn't have a postal service as we have today, but it was pretty personal. People knew who was sending the question. It just the trend that evolved in later generations to write the exact name and location of each one who has a question, back then didn't exist yet. Okay. So now let's look briefly at the Teshuvah Kafhet. Maybe we'll have to do some more of it next time. But here's the question. Reuven asa isha uchnasa, ואחר כך היא ניחרה עגונה, ונשא אישה אחרת במדינה אחרת, והרשתה זאת את אחיה להביא לה גט מראובן בעלה. So Reuven got married, and then he abandoned her, Aguna, and she's anchored to him. Venasa, and he married another woman in another country. So he left her. He was traveling for business, probably. This is a common thing in those countries at the time. Unlike the Ashkenazi community, which were more contained, usually local, living in Germany or France, the people of the Middle East moved all the time mainly between Spain, Iraq, Morocco, and Egypt, but also traveled to Europe and the Far East, and things like that happened. So he decided to stay in another country, and he doesn't come back. And this woman gave a power of attorney, or empowered her brother to bring her a get from her husband. And the brother took the get from the husband, from Reuven, and gave it to his sister. And he handed it to her b'fnei Aidei Mesira. There were 2 witnesses who observed the act of the handing of the get to the woman. After a while, and I will translate directly. After a while, Reuven came back and he wanted to return to his first wife, and he said, "This divorce document is fake, and I never gave the order to write the get. Right? The husband must write the get willingly." He says, "I never wrote that." Now, the document is in the possession of the woman, but the ones who are signed on it are not known to Bedin. That's called nitkayem bechotmav. That the signees are known to the Bedin, and they could recognize who they are. So there is room to say that maybe this document is a fake document, and she claims that she got the get from 2 witnesses, and the witnesses said we received it from the brother who was the messenger, and we gave it to her. And the brother says that I was given the get by the husband in order to be a messenger. So what happens here? The chain of transmission. The husband says, I never wrote the get. The brother of the wife says, I got it from you. I gave it to the two witnesses, and they gave it to the wife. So the place where this seems to be weak is the brother getting the document from the husband. והיה שם אחד מהתלמידים והורה שהגט בטל מכמה פנים. And one of the disciples, and he doesn't mention his name, ruled that this get is invalid for several reasons. One, because the Mishnah says that when a woman sends someone to receive her get, she needs two groups of witnesses, two sets of witnesses. One who will witness the delivery of the get from the husband's hand to the hand of the messenger, and another that will see the delivery of the get from the hand of the messenger to the hand of the woman. Also, another problem is that we don't know who the signees are. And since she and the witnesses do not know who gave it to the messenger, whether it was the husband directly or the messenger of the husband, or in this case the brother, even though she owns it, this get is invalid. And even more so, says this messenger admits that he was always the messenger of the woman, and the get that he received was only under the condition that he is the messenger of the woman. And the husband says, "Get ze mezuyafu v'chafat talmid ze tabal mezuyafu." So, and the husband, with all that argument, says this is a fake get. So, the here also when he quotes the arguments of the Talmid, the only time that he refers to a Mishnah is this Mishnah, Isha Shamra Kabel Giti. He doesn't quote the Talmudic discussion, even though he refers to it indirectly. And that Talmid, that disciple who was there, forced the husband, Lichtov get aher, he forced him to write another get. And another interesting fact, that we might gloss over it, but it's extremely important. What would have happened with that situation in a modern Bedin? What would have happened would be that if the woman already got married, they would force her to get a divorce from the new husband, and they would declare the original get to be invalid and fake. And if the husband would want to remain with this state of affairs where he's in another country with another woman, that first wife would remain aguna. Instead, the disciple here that Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi refers to, and he does not disagree with him at the end, forces the husband to write a get. And that is the part of the approach of the Geonim that was later on changed by Maimonides, where so Rambam Maimonides agrees that in certain situations the husband can be forced to write a get. Actually, this he does. The Ashkenazim do not accept that. What Maimonides does, when he goes against the Geonim, is in the case of Moredet, against a case of a woman who rebelled against her husband. She's called a Moredet. She denies him sexual relationships for several reasons, and the Geonim would say in that case we force the husband to write a get. So they had no problems with what is called get me'useh, a forced get. They believe that as long as it is the Beddin who forces the husband to write a get, that get is valid. So there was another Talmid there, and another disciple was there, and he disagreed with him. I'm not going to go into all of the discussions. I just want to really briefly look at the Teshuvah. He says, Teshuvah, עמדנו על שאלה זו וראינו על דעת מי שאמר שהגט בטל והוצרך גט אחר שאין דברים נכוחים. He agrees with the disciple who said that the get is invalid and you need to write another one, even though that the reasons that he used to, the reason or the proofs that he used to invalidate the get are not are incorrect. אלא שהגט בטל מכל מקום, אבל זה שורש הגט כשר, דברי הבל הן, ואין כדאי להשיב עליהם. The one who said that the get is kosher is not even worth answering to. We see the strength, the oaths of the Rif. He doesn't even want to bother with him. And he says וזה שאמר שהגט בטל, משום שהבעל אומר לא כתבתיו ולא נתתיו לה, אלא מזויף הוא טענה יפה, היא מבטלת את הגט, משום שלא נתקיים בחותמיו. The one who says that the get is invalid, if you say it's because the husband claims I did not write it and I did not give it to her, this is a good argument, because the messenger can only be trusted when the husband admits that he wrote it. But if the husband would have said, I wrote the get and I gave it to you only as a collateral, only to hold to it, but not to deliver it to the wife, we don't trust the husband, we trust the messenger. And he goes on into this discussion. Like I said, I don't want to get to the full discussion, just to show you the process of his thought. And eventually, he quotes two Hachamim from the Talmud, Rav Hizda v'Rav Huna, and here again, he doesn't say where in Gittin, where in the Talmud. He just quotes them as colleagues. For the Geonim, and for the Rif, the sages of the Talmud are sort of contemporaries. They still work within the same continuum. He could still argue with them and agree with them. He says, Afal Gav, he presents the opinion of Rav Huna and the opinion of Rav Hizda, and he says, Afal Gav de Rav Huna, Rabbe de Rav Hizda Hava. Even though Rav Huna was the master of Rav Hizda, Led Bechan Halacha ki Rav Hizda. Here the halacha is not like him. And here it says, Vezo, Shaisha Shaget Yotzet Tachat Yada, since the woman has the get, and the witnesses testify that they gave it to her, if we would have known who the signees are, we know that the people who signed on the get are valid and kosher, we would not care about the claim of the husband that it is fake, but rather we would believe the messenger. But here, the husband denies the writing of the get, and we don't know who the people who signed on the get are. Harei ze get batel. So the real reason for the get to not be valid is that the husband denies writing it, and we don't know who signed on it. So it makes it's almost saying it's just logical to assume that the get was written by the messenger himself, by the brother, and he signed people, or he signed himself in a way that is not recognizable. Harei ze get batel. וזה שורה הכן כדין הורה, אלא שהרואה שהבינה נכוחות והלכתה כבתיו ולא מטעמה. So he says the one who said that the get is batel is correct, only not because of the proofs that he presented. But so halacha is like him, but not because of what he said. The general gist of this teshuvah that we see is that open discussion without the need to rely on Talmudic precedents. There is a reference to the Mishnah, there is a reference to Rav Huna and Rav Hizda, but that's it. And also the interaction between rabbis. One Talmud says this, one Talmud says that. Each one of them has an authority. Maybe they were not learned enough. One of them was not learned enough. This is something that the Rambam later on argues about. He says that there are certain Batei Dinim that are not knowledgeable enough. It could be that people were either not knowledgeable or that they took the halacha in a direction that not everybody agreed on. But this is some of the reality that emerges from this teshuvah of Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi. And we'll conclude with that today. Next time we might continue with another teshuvah of the Rif. If not, we'll continue to other responsa.